All right, sorry everyone. For whatever reason, I lost the signal. This happens a lot with when I'm doing Facebook Lives. I tend to lose a connection, and I apologize for all this tech glitch. And like I said, I was talking about triggers. Why is it important for us to? Why should we care about triggers? Basically, that's what I'm trying to say to you. And I was saying that. So imagine that one person that triggers you. Let's say a coworker, right? There's somebody I know said their ex-husband does that for them a lot. So imagine each time you have to engage with them, right? At work, you gotta see them at least 5 days a week, 40 hours a week, right? If you have an ex, maybe you have children, you have to co-parent, so that makes it hard. Each time you have to engage with them, there's a lot of anxiety, there's stress, right? It really gets in the way of like really you living your life in the way that makes sense to you, because we know how stress impacts our overall well-being, health, and all of that, right? And I was reading about another statistics about how a majority of adults in the U.S. have really like intense amount of anxiety, right? And so sometimes it's relationships you are in that brings us that much anxiety. And so that's why it's important to really like learn to manage our triggers so they don't run our lives, because they will tend to run our lives. And in essence, they tend to disempower us. So far we're good. I'm hoping the technology holds on because it's going to be kind of annoying if this keeps happening. So quick question, what are triggers, right? Or hard buttons? So if you know, you can just chime in the chat, but simply put, triggers it could be any stimulus that upsets us, right? That throws us into a state of upset or anger, right? And the reason why that happens is because they are connected to a painful event or experience we've had maybe in the past. And so any stimulus, meaning anything that reminds us of that experience, will press up those hard buttons for us, right? And the irony about this thing is that most of the time we're not even making the connection between that event and us keep getting triggered by either people or certain events or certain behaviors. But there is a direct correlation, a direct connection really between that painful event and the things that will trigger us. And so triggers come in different forms, right? So at one level, they're sensory. So what do I mean by that? So it could be a certain taste, right, or smell, right? Especially if it reminds you of that experience that was associated with that experience, right? It could be things like certain phrases that people say, right? Maybe somebody says to you, "You always," right? Maybe that that could offend you, right? That could trigger you because depending what that means for you, right? For example, I had somebody say the word "just" will do that. Would used to do that for them, right? Before they know that was what it was, like, because I guess to them it was a question of if you're saying, "Can you just?" There's "Can you just that?" It's sort of like you're diminishing that contribution, right? So really take a moment and really think about that. Like, what are some of this, that if this sounds familiar to you, what are some of the things that triggers you? And maybe the best way to do this is think of a situation, a person who normally does this to you, and see what would have happened, right? What would they have said to you? What have they done? Is it the exact words that they say to you, or is it how they said them? Was it then the verbal expression, or was it how they smelled, right? So it's a good way to begin to assess what really triggers you, because then when you know, then you're able to do something about it, right? Because then if you don't know, like, how can you fix it if you don't know what triggers you? So that's what triggers are, right? Anything that reminds us of that painful experience we've had in the past, right? Like I said, it could be a smell, it could be a sound, right? It could be the words that were used, right? That upset us or that hurt us. And so anything, and it doesn't matter who's doing it, that when that happens, it takes us back there to that experience. And so what happens when that experience, when we taken back to that painful experience, so it triggers our defense mechanism, also called the fight and flight mechanism. And when they get triggered, then we get into defensive mode. And that's when things begin to spiral out of control, right? Because when we are that triggered, when we are feeling defensive, we want to protect ourselves, then we want to fight or fly or run away, right? Some people freeze, right? Hopefully you don't freeze, but that's what happens when things begin to spiral out of control, because we're thrown into the fight or flight or freeze mode, right? I'm quite sure most of you are familiar with that. And I see Kim Schaefer says, good morning, good morning. Good morning to you too, and thank you for joining us. And so what I want to do now, I don't want to keep you here forever, but what I want to do now is really walk you through a simple 5-step process that I developed to help people move through triggers. Obviously, the first step of that process is awareness. And what do I mean by awareness is really being aware when you've entered the trigger zone, right? What I call the trigger zone. And how do you know if you're in the trigger zone? Well, you'll know because the beauty about us being human beings is we get to experience things in our bodies, right? And so, because remember I told you it triggers the fight or flight mechanism, a stress mechanism. So because of that, we'll have certain symptoms, if you want to call it that, or signs that happens in the body. So it could be we start getting flushed, the heart start beating really, really, really fast, right? And the breathing also gets faster, right? Maybe we get tight, clenched fists, clenched jaw, right? That tightness, or maybe we get even super angry. So I want to take a moment to see which one of those sounds familiar for you. And the best way to do this is think about something, a situation maybe that triggers you, right? And see what are some of those symptoms or signs that you have entered the trigger zone, right? Because it's important to know that. So you can, part of being able to de-escalate a heated situation is being aware, right, when you're in that situation. And the body is really a good way to give us that information, right? So that's step one, it's awareness. And then step two, once you're aware that has happened to you, so you wanna sort of create a space, right, between yourself and that heated situation. And how you do that, you could do it multiple ways, but how you do that is you could use the breath, right? Because I find the breath to be the easiest tool to use. Why? Because we have it accessible to us, we're always breathing, but the difference here is to breathe mindfully. And I know I'm quite sure a lot of you are very familiar with breath work, but it's really doing it consciously, right? And here the difference is taking those long breaths, maybe to a count of 5, and releasing, right? And you can even make the out breath a little bit longer, right? Maybe 7 seconds. If you're doing to a count of 5, maybe you can exhale to a count of 7. And what breathing does, you begin to send messages to the brain, right? Because the part of the brain called the reptilian brain that deals with the stress mechanism, the fight or flight mechanism, you begin to send message to that part of the brain that maybe it's okay, right? That really maybe we're not really facing a tiger, because that part of the brain is looking for danger. So anything that looks like danger, it activates it. So when somebody is yelling at you, trying to attack you, so that's what's going to activate that fight or flight mechanism. And so you want to be able to calm that part of the brain down. And why is that important? It's important because when that part of our brain is activated in the back, called the lizard brain, reptilian brain, it shuts down the front part of the brain, called the prefrontal cortex. And that's a part of the brain that's responsible for reasoning, like logic, problem solving, creativity, all those attributes that we need, right, to be able to resolve whatever the conflict is about. But when that part of the brain is activated, it's very hard for us to access the part of the brain that's responsible for basically handling the situation. So one way that I love to turn off that part of the brain, the reptilian brain, is through breath, right, breathing. And when you do those long breaths, you signal into the part of the brain that all is well, right? Because if all was not well, you will not be breathing that way. If there was a real tiger standing in front of you, you will not be breathing that way, right? You'll be like getting ready to fight or run, right? And so breath is very powerful. So I want you to take a moment to really think about what are some of the things that you could do to begin to calm yourself down, right? To calm the part of the brain when you find yourself in that situation. Like, how do you to create that space for yourself? Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you, I have a worksheet for you guys. It's in the, I may have to repost it. It's in the first video that I had to sign on. Like, I'll post it again. So there's a workbook that you can follow. You have all the steps in there, because I know it's kind of hard to do on a Facebook Live because you have no visual, there's no screens, no slides to follow along. But I made a worksheet for you to follow along, so you can do the exercise in the worksheet. So I'll repost it again before the end of the live, so that you can have access to it. So that's step 2, is centering yourself. And the breath is one way to be able to do that for yourself, to center yourself. And then step 3 is really uncover, what was it that got you triggered? And I already talked about it, right? Was it something that they said to you? That tends to be another common one, right? And here you want to be specific. What exactly did they say to you that got you so upset, right? And you want to be specific because it matters a lot. And later on, I can show you what to do with it. So that's what you want to do. You want to uncover what is it that they said to you that got you so heated, right? And so this is really, this whole process is about being, like, really going within, right? It's about self-awareness, going within and trying to uncover, like taking a step back really and looking back at that situation and trying to see what really happened here, what really went down here, what got me so triggered here. That's really what the process is about. Okay, and of course, then we get to step 4. Step 4, you want to, what I call lovingly, really examine, right? Really what happened? Okay, when this person said this or reacted this way or that way, this is what happened, right? Maybe you got triggered, maybe I got angry. And then what happened after that, right? So you sort of kind of do sort of a movie, it's called like the movie technique, where you're taking it frame by frame or scene by scene to be able to understand like what really happened, right? So they said this, and then I don't know, like went off, right? And in the process of all of that, you getting upset, maybe we started talking even louder, like screaming and gesturing and stuff like that, right? Then you're gonna ask, then while I was doing that, then what happened, right? Because this cause and effect thing, right? What happened? Did they get even more louder and more defensive, right? Probably, if you're dealing with somebody who's more of a fighter, right? So it's being aware, like, you know, if this happened and then led to this and then led to this. And one of the big questions you have to ask yourself is, seeing myself in that situation as you really reflecting back, right? Sort of watching that from a distance as if you're watching a movie. So when you see yourself, the way everything unfolded, did you like who you were being? Right? Because that's a very important question to ask. Did you like who you were being? And who were you being, right? That's another way to ask that question, like, who were you being in that moment, right? Maybe you were just totally out of control, right? They just throw you through the deep end, you're totally out of control. And if you were totally out of control, did you like that? Did you like that expression of yourself? Did you like who you were being? And if you answered no to that question, which will take you to this next step, is to then ask yourself, if that is the case, if I didn't like who I was being, how can I take care of this next time, right? How can I deal with this situation next time? Or maybe what could I have done differently, right? Once I have this awareness that what triggered me was when they said this or said that to me, right? And once I know that I can create space by taking a breath, and maybe you may have to walk away from them for a minute to go breathe, right? To go collect yourself, right? And maybe you may have to say something to them. Maybe the line's like right now I'm really upset. So I'd like to take a moment, right, to calm down so I can come back and have a meaningful conversation with you. But in order to be able to get to that place of having a meaningful conversation with somebody, you have to be able to first go through that process, right? Recognize that and really answer the question number 4 that I asked you. Did you like who you were being, right? And if you didn't like who you're being, who would you rather be, right? Who would you rather be? Maybe you'd rather be somebody who's in control, right? Somebody who knows how to handle myself in situations like that without embarrassing myself and making a mockery out of myself, right? And so if you are that person, how would that person show up to deal with that situation, right, if it ever came up again? And obviously, if it's somebody you have to deal with on a regular basis, like your coworker or the other co-parent, like who really I deal with in my work, I deal with parents like really struggling to co-parent, and so that's very common. So how do you begin to engage with them in a way that you don't always lose your mind in the process, right? Because then, you know, it becomes, like I said, it becomes stressful each time you have to engage with them, right? Each time you have to see them, or they call you, right? You see the phone number flash up on the call ID, you can feel that intensity, that anxiety begin to build up in your body. And so this process allows you to take a step back and create space for yourself between that situation or maybe even that person, so you can regain control, bring back this part of the brain, that focuses the things, right? So that way you could really kind of get creative, because it's also the part of the brain that's very creative. So you can get creative in terms of how to better deal with that situation. And of course, it requires also knowing a little bit about conflict resolution, some basic conflict resolution skills, right, when you go back to deal with them, right? So yeah, this is what I had for you today. I wanted to keep this nice and sweet and short, right, for you, just give you some highlights. And then basically what I shared with you is it's one of the process from my 5-step process that I really teach people how to really find peace of mind, you could say, right, from these situations. And this is but step 1, right, really to help you if you're in the heat of that moment, right? How do you disengage from that, right? Because you got to be able to disengage, right, to stop the spiral, right? But the next steps to that process is really, remember I told you that the bigger part of this is that why we get triggered is because we're being reminded of a painful experience that we had in the past. And so step 2 of this process is really learning to connect or uncover what that experience was and heal it, so to speak, bring it into completion, right? Because that's really what's going to free you, right? And also, right, because that's really what's really going to help you, what's going to free you when you really resolve, right, that unresolved, unfinished business. Because otherwise, that's going to keep happening, right? Whether it's the same person or different people, that's going to keep happening. People triggering you like over and over again, as long as that issue is still there, right? So connecting with it and then resolving it, it's really the bigger part of this process, right? And it's something I help you do. I love to help my clients connecting with those experiences so they can bring them into completion. And of course, learning some simple conflict resolution skills, right, that you can employ in every day. And you don't even have to be a conflict resolution specialist, but there's certain ways that of being and engaging with other people to diffuse, right, when things get heated, so you can diffuse, right? What do you say to them, right? You're gonna know how to approach and also know how to approach the situation, but also like, how do you show up to that conversation, right? So I teach that as well as one of the things I love to teach, like the really simple conflict resolution skills that are easy to do, implement. You don't need to be a conflict resolution specialist to be able to do that. So if this sounds interesting to you, like let me know. You can private message me, PM me if you want to know more. And maybe I could even do a class with slides, because I think it's easier to teach with slides than just to talk to a camera. And because I know I'm a visual person and I prefer to kind of like see as opposed to just listening. So maybe I could do a class about this and you can have slides and attach the workbook. And like I said, I have a workbook, so I'll put it back in here because I have to restart because this thing, the technology went out on me. But yeah, like let me know if you have any questions, you'd help with any of this, the things I talked about. I'll be more than happy to assist you. And again, you can PM me, you see my name there, okay? Thanks, and thanks for watching. Unless you have any questions, let me see really quick if you have any questions. I know Maria says, thanks for your advice, that's very helpful. What did you find helpful, Maria? I'm curious to know. If you're still on. And Matthew says, good morning to you, Beth, as well. And thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, guys. All right, awesome. So if there are not any more questions, I'm gonna sign off. Well, first let me put that link in here, and then before I sign off. And I'm gonna put it in the, oops, wrong. Sorry guys. I thought I should copy. I came in early, so I think I missed it about LOL. Yeah, Alicia, I think I'm hoping I'm saying your name right. That's no problem because I think it's gonna be in the thread in the group, so you can watch the replay. But if you have any questions, like reach out to me, just PM me, and I'll be more than happy to go over it with you as well. But anyway, thanks for joining in regardless. Right? Yeah. So I think you still catch it. I think the replays are in there somewhere in the main thread in the group. All right. Thank you guys. And that's the link for the worksheet. I put it in the comment section, so you can just click and access it there. All right. Bye.